The Kaskaskia Curse and the Cahokia Connection by Vicar. The state of Illinois has much to recommend it. It is a beautiful prairie state, touched in the northern reaches by rugged country, and to the south by bottomlands rich with game and heavily forested. A vast amount of food is grown in Illinois, once mostly prairie, and not a small amount of ethanol is also produced. The state boasts the mighty city of Chicago and several of the nation's better institutions of higher learning. It is governed from the center, however, though many Illinoisans are of the opinion that it is ruled in fact by Chicago, and has been for many years. The state has a storied past, replete with landmark legal cases, courageous military actions, and the long, hard struggle of settlers in unknown territory. Illinois was once the American frontier, believe it or not, part of the Northwest Territory, and it is also notable for a handful of other prideful facts. It was conquered for the revolutionary effort by the noteworthy George Rogers Clark and fewer than 200 irregulars, hardened frontiersmen and trappers for the most part. Abraham Lincoln and Barack Obama both claimed Illinois as their homes before ascending to the presidency. No less, a company of Illinois riflemen nearly captured the Mexican general Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna while deployed during the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. He was, of course, the notorious character responsible for the massacre at the Alamo. That's not exactly how it went, but legend is better than history. The Illinois riflemen managed to get Santa Anna's wooden leg, evidenced by the fact that it is today on display in a Springfield, Illinois museum. It is worth noting that the leg is not in Texas. No Texan could manage to get close enough to Santa Anna to spook him enough to leave a leg behind, much less capture the fellow. This incident, along with the heroism of the 1st and 2nd Illinois Riflemen at the Battle of Buena Vista, and perhaps the succession of Obama after George W. Bush, certainly has something to do with the old saying, "Never send a Texan to do an Illinoisan's job." Foreigners often associate America with Texas and vice versa, but it is possible to make a far stronger case that it is Illinois that constitutes the true heart of the nation. But enough of regionalism. Such things are beneath the discussions undertaken here at the Lamp. Springfield was not always the capital of Illinois. Before that, the seat of state governance was in Vandalia, and prior to that it was at a little place called Kaskaskia, population 9 as of the 2000 census. The ghost town was once a thriving city, defended by a nearby fort of the same name, and heavily populated for the times. It was made up largely of settlers of French origin, and a fair population of Native American, and persons of mixed background were also to be found. The town was apparently designed to be stately, as there were numerous large stone mansions and farmhouses, though visitors often described the place as a bit shabby, likely a function of its rapid growth. Rivers have a way of binding themselves to communities, particularly places of power. The practical value of the river grew Kaskaskia, but the mystic significance mattered far more in the end. Kaskaskia was settled in 1703 and was situated on the Mississippi, at the western edge of what would become Illinois. It was an auspicious location, at least it appeared to be. The town commanded regional river trade, and the fort made the area secure. By 1809, Kaskaskia was successful enough to be established as the capital, but it only held the distinction for about 9 years. By 1818, Illinois had become a state, and as such, legislators felt that the capital should be more centrally located. The seat of government was moved to Vandalia, but this did not greatly diminish the successful river port and trading port at Kaskaskia. The strange fate of the place came much later, and its source turned out, according to folklore of course, to be a matter of occult magic from the town's earliest days. According to legend, the doom of Kaskaskia resulted not from simple natural forces at work, but instead was the denouement of a drama, as always a tale of star-crossed lovers, jealous men, and desperate youth striving for the right to self-determination. As the story goes, a wealthy trader named Bernard, whether this was the first name or the family name is rarely told and never certain, had a beautiful young daughter of marriageable age. She committed the cardinal sin of falling in love with a young Native American worker in her father's employ. When her father discovered the affair, likely nothing what we might imagine, since this was said to have occurred in the 1730s, before webcam nudity and sexting, he dismissed the young man from his service and implored local landowners and merchants to forbid him employment. Apparently, this Bernard had some weight in the community, and the young man was essentially exiled. For about a year, Bernard's daughter secretly pined while pretending to be interested in other suitors who came to pay her court. But a band of natives at last came through the town, ostensibly to trade. This was not an uncommon thing in those days, and suspicions were not aroused until Bernard one day discovered that his daughter was gone. The band had included her true love in disguise, and the couple had fled in the direction of Cahokia. Bernard organized pursuit, including some of his daughter's more acceptable suitors. The angry father and his posse caught up with the couple at Cahokia, where they seized the young man and decided to drown him in the nearby river. He was bound to a log, and as he was being taken to the banks, we can pause to imagine the scene. Frontiersmen and trappers, clad in wool and buckskin, sporting tomahawks, long knives and flintlocks, observing the scene and smoking from pipes. The daughter of Bernard weeping, perhaps begging her father for mercy, her petticoats filthy and torn from the recent frantic flight. Her lover, the young native man, bloodied and beaten, but unbroken. Over all this, the shadow of a power place, the so-called Monk's Mound, looms. In all, the event is laden with emotional power and all the makings of true magic about to work. The young native man is said to have pronounced a curse as he was thrown into the river to drown. He intoned that Bernard would be dead within the year, and that soon after the youth himself and Bernard's daughter would be reunited in the afterworld. Kaskaskia was damned and would be destroyed by the river that fed it, and all the land would be drowned. The altars of the churches were doomed to destruction, and the homes of the white men too. Most disturbingly, the young Indian, in some renderings a young shaman or the son of a shaman, or chief of the Illiniwek, pronounced that the dead of Kaskaskia will be cast out of their graves. The legend states that Bernard was killed in a duel a few months later, and that his daughter was dead of grief and heartache within the year. But Kaskaskia went on for many years, until in 1881 a strange shift in the Mississippi River was finally complete, flooding the town for good and cutting it off from land. The Kaskaskia site is today on the west side of the Mississippi, still considered Illinois, despite the fact that the river theoretically forms the boundary between Illinois and Missouri. To be sure, this was the culmination in a long process, aided by events like the earthquake of December 15th and 16th, 1811, during which the river was said to briefly flow backward. Matters occult step in when we recognize that the tragic and romantic drama recounted above is said to have taken place in 1735 in early spring. It is impossible to determine if this was precisely at the time of the equinox, but if it was, then the confluence of natural and mystical power was at a crest, since the killing of the young shaman occurred at Cahokia. The people of that place, long since gone by the time of these events, were careful astronomers. They constructed a henge out of wood, reasonably famous in the region to this day. The exact nature of these circular structures, whether in the New World or Old, whether in stone or timber, is still not clearly understood in academic circles. But to the occultist, this is a simple matter of a mystic calendar, serving simultaneous purposes. These include pragmatic measures of time and careful tracking of seasons, but also mystical alignments of energy to create power centers. The energy in question is always a matter of debate, bound to mislead the uninitiated off into the weeds, while professional academics pooh-pah the whole matter. But those in the know are perfectly clear that the energy in question, at least on our end, is composed of human thought and human emotion. Our belief in things and our attention to them constitute a woven framework of consciousness energy. While hard scientists decry these notions, they are also fools who work daily to raise a mechanistic state founded upon technology using human beings as a resource and a kind of economic fuel. Beware any woman or man who struggles with love and conversation, but manages numbers with ease. The legend cited here is hardly a matter of historical record. It is in fact an anecdote at best, but it has occult references in plenty. The fact that the murder of the young native man is said to have occurred at Cahokia is significant enough to give us pause, but the fact that the final flooding of Kaskaskia occurred in 1881 is all the more significant. The number is perfectly balanced and reduces in numerological progression to 9. The initiated know well what that means. More importantly, the events that set the curse in motion occurred in 1735, 146 years before the curse had run its course. In the flood of 1881, the dead were forced out of their graves and were washed away by the river. The altars of the churches were destroyed by the rising waters. The wrathful prophecy was fulfilled. We are left with a set of numerological resonances that even the most casual occultist must wonder at. The 1811 earthquake occurred 76 years after the curse was pronounced. The mystic power of the curse ran 146 years, which is a numerological 11, a master number. We might poke at random into any listing of events and find a few significant examples like this, but the overall character and quality in this matter is of a genuine magical process. In essence, the river might have swallowed Kaskaskia in time anyway, but it appears that something really did lock the decline of that city into a specifically mystical pattern, a magical schedule. The tale told by tour guides and state historical site officials at Fort Kaskaskia is an example of human beings manufacturing a story to explain a set of events. It is also very easy to conceal behind myth and folklore something more significant. In the esoteric tradition, we learn that the land and the people are bound together. A nation is a composition of beliefs, since the theoretical divisions and districts of a country are imaginary at best. The great American state that was born in the colonies has its heart and prime arteries in the Midwest. Much of the reported environmental cause of the shift in the Mississippi River, described above, is associated with the extensive deforestation of its banks to feed the engines of steamships. In essence, whether a young native shaman cursed the region or not, the ways of the new nation were not and are still not in accord with the natural order. Here at the Lamp, we are often concerned with various things of mainstream ufological, cryptozoological, and/or paranormal significance, but sometimes we turn slightly aside from the paranormal heartland in order to explore the hinterland of weird. It is worth noting that the old habit of utilizing imagery and symbols drawn from a conquered people has much to recommend it psychologically and culturally, but far more support for the practice may be found in mysticism. The very generations that embraced cultural and racial divisions and hatreds also enshrine certain ideals associated with native populations in the Americas, and a kind of mystic reconciliation is worked by this. Awe and respect for what one has destroyed is both cruel and hypocritical, but it has a magical purpose of holding back the forces of vengeance which were unleashed by the sins of imperialism. This is a curious example of the duality of human nature and mystic nature. If we believe not at all in mysticism and spiritual power, then, in a sense, the exploitation of Native American imagery is a matter of putting away stereotypes and looking toward a new age. But it is this new age that we should pause to consider. Perhaps it is sterile and without character or charisma. Perhaps it is an age of death, in which the dead have risen from their graves because the altars of the churches are no more. Value systems die hard deaths, not because people are unwilling to give them up, but because the cost is often more than we can bear. For the uninitiated, a hidden meaning is hard to find, even in the simplest slip-coded passages. But to play upon metaphor is never enough. To farm and mine and otherwise refine the resources of raw imagery can only point us in the right direction, when it does not give us specific instructions for rites, operations, or processing. Why care about the wronged natives, despairing maidens, and flooded Kaskaskia? If you would conquer a land and lay its people under the sword, it were best to remember and honor the ghosts of those you have wronged. The ghosts may forgive or forget in time, but they still walk the land, and the land never forgets.